In the heart of downtown Seattle, where the rain never seemed to stop and the city lights cast long shadows between towering buildings, there lived a boy who most people never really saw. His name was Marcus, and at 12 years old, he had already learned lessons that most adults never have to face. Born with dwarfism, Marcus stood just over 3 feet tall, but what he lacked in height, he made up for in heart, intelligence, and an unbreakable spirit that even the cruelest circumstances couldn't diminish. Marcus had been living on the streets for 2 years, ever since he aged out of his last foster home. The system had failed him repeatedly, not because of malice, but because finding families willing to adopt a child with dwarfism proved nearly impossible. Social workers meant well, but Marcus had bounced from home to home, never staying long enough to feel truly wanted or loved. Eventually, he stopped trying to fit in and decided that the streets, harsh as they were, offered him something the system couldn't: the freedom to be himself without judgment or pity. Every morning, Marcus would wake up in his carefully chosen hiding spot behind Rosie's Diner, a small 24-hour restaurant where the owner, Mrs. Chen, had a soft heart and occasionally left day-old sandwiches in a clean box by the back door. Marcus had made this spot his home because it offered protection from the wind, was relatively safe from other homeless individuals who might see him as an easy target, and most importantly, it was close to the public library where he spent most of his days. The library had become Marcus's sanctuary, his school, and his escape from the harsh reality of street life. The librarians, particularly Ms. Rodriguez, had noticed the small boy who came in every day when the doors opened at 9 a.m. and stayed until closing time at 8 p.m. She never asked uncomfortable questions about where he lived or why he was always alone. Instead, she quietly guided him toward books that sparked his incredible curiosity about the world. Marcus devoured everything: science books, history, literature, mathematics. He taught himself algebra using library computers and became fascinated with astronomy, dreaming of stars he could barely see through the city's light pollution. What most people didn't realize was that Marcus possessed an extraordinary mind. While other children his age were struggling with basic math, Marcus was working through calculus problems he'd found in college textbooks. He had taught himself 3 languages using library resources and had memorized more historical facts than most college history majors. But perhaps most remarkably, Marcus had developed an incredible ability to read people, a survival skill that had kept him safe on the streets and helped him navigate the complex social dynamics of library life. Despite his circumstances, Marcus maintained a dignity and kindness that surprised everyone who took the time to really see him. He never begged for money, instead earning small amounts by helping elderly library patrons with computer problems or reading to children during story time when Ms. Rodriguez was short-staffed. The children loved him because he didn't talk down to them and told the most amazing stories, weaving in facts about space and science that made their eyes light up with wonder. Marcus had rules for himself that he never broke. He always kept himself as clean as possible using the library's bathroom facilities. He never stole, even when he was desperately hungry. He treated everyone with respect, from the wealthy businesspeople who hurried past him on the street to the other homeless individuals who shared his world. And most importantly, he never let bitterness take root in his heart, despite having every reason to be angry at a world that had repeatedly rejected him. The hardest part about living on the streets wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the invisibility. People looked through Marcus as if he weren't there, and when they did notice him, their expressions often shifted from surprise to pity to discomfort. He had learned to read these micro-expressions and had developed strategies to make others feel more at ease, often cracking a gentle joke or offering a warm smile that transformed their initial reaction into something more positive. But as winter approached, Marcus knew his situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. The nights were getting colder, and his small body struggled more than most to maintain warmth. He had been saving the few dollars he earned helping at the library, but it wasn't nearly enough for proper shelter. He was too proud to ask for help directly, but deep down, he wondered if this might be the winter that finally defeated him. What Marcus didn't know was that someone had been watching him, not with pity or curiosity, but with growing admiration and respect. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, a man in an expensive but understated coat had been observing Marcus at the library, witnessing his interactions with others, his dedication to learning, and his remarkable character. This man, whose name was David Sullivan, was about to change Marcus's life in ways neither of them could imagine. But this story isn't just about a rescue, it's about the incredible power of human resilience, the profound impact of seeing someone's true worth beyond their circumstances, and the amazing things that happen when genuine kindness meets extraordinary potential. Marcus's journey was about to take a turn that would surprise not just him, but everyone who thought they knew what his story would be. David Sullivan was a man who understood the weight of secrets. At 52 years old, he had built a fortune through a series of brilliant tech innovations, but few people knew his name or his face. He preferred it that way. While other billionaires sought spotlight and recognition, David had always been more interested in using his wealth quietly, strategically, and most importantly, meaningfully. He had been orphaned himself at age 8 and had spent several difficult years in the foster system before being adopted by a loving family who saw his potential and nurtured his gifts. David's Tuesday and Thursday routine had started accidentally. His company's headquarters were located just 6 blocks from the downtown library, and he had begun walking there during his lunch breaks as a way to clear his mind and think through complex business problems. The library's quiet atmosphere and the sight of people pursuing knowledge and betterment had always energized him. It was during one of these walks that he first noticed Marcus. Initially, what caught David's attention wasn't Marcus's height, it was his extraordinary focus. While other children in the library were playing games on computers or chatting with friends, this small boy was completely absorbed in what appeared to be an advanced physics textbook. David, who held 3 degrees including one in theoretical physics, was curious enough to casually observe what the boy was reading. To his amazement, Marcus wasn't just looking at pictures. He was taking notes, working through equations, and clearly understanding complex concepts that challenged most college students. Over the following weeks, David's curiosity grew into genuine fascination. He watched Marcus interact with library staff and patrons, noting the boy's remarkable social intelligence and natural leadership abilities. During children's storytime, Marcus would often end up helping other kids with their homework, explaining concepts with a patience and clarity that impressed even the adult librarians. When elderly patrons struggled with technology, Marcus was always ready to help, never showing frustration or condescension. But it was Marcus's character that truly captured David's attention. He witnessed small acts of kindness that spoke volumes about the boy's nature. When a homeless veteran came into the library seeking warmth and was treated rudely by another patron, Marcus quietly approached the man and shared his own snack, engaging him in respectful conversation about his military service. When a young mother was struggling to keep her toddler quiet in the library, Marcus appeared with a picture book and managed to captivate the child with an impromptu story about brave astronauts and friendly aliens. David began to research Marcus's situation discreetly. Through careful inquiry and by speaking with Ms. Rodriguez, who had become protective of the boy, David learned about Marcus's history in the foster system and his current living situation. What he discovered broke his heart, but also filled him with a profound respect for Marcus's resilience and integrity. Here was a child who had every reason to be bitter, angry, or destructive, yet instead had chosen to remain kind, curious, and generous with others. The more David observed, the more he recognized something familiar in Marcus. Not just intelligence, but a particular type of innovative thinking that David had seen in only a handful of people throughout his career. Marcus approached problems from unexpected angles, made connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, and had an intuitive understanding of complex systems that couldn't be taught. During one observation session, David watched Marcus help a college student understand a programming concept by explaining it through a metaphor involving planetary orbits and gravitational forces. The explanation was so elegant and effective that even David, who had been programming for decades, gained new insight into the concept. David also noticed Marcus's remarkable emotional intelligence. The boy had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was struggling and offer exactly the type of help they needed. He celebrated others' successes genuinely, never seeming to feel diminished by their achievements. When a young girl his age won a library reading contest, Marcus was the first to congratulate her, even though he had read 3 times as many books. This generosity of spirit, combined with his intellectual gifts, convinced David that Marcus wasn't just a child who needed help. He was someone with the potential to change the world. As autumn progressed into winter, David's concern for Marcus's immediate safety grew. He had discreetly arranged for Mrs. Chen at the diner to always have extra food available and had anonymously paid for several improvements to the library's heating system, but he knew these measures weren't enough. Marcus needed real stability, proper nutrition, educational opportunities that matched his abilities, and most importantly, someone who believed in his potential. But David faced a dilemma. His wealth and success were the result of careful, strategic thinking, and he knew that approaching this situation required the same methodical approach. Simply offering money or resources wouldn't address Marcus's real needs. The boy needed a family, a sense of belonging, and the opportunity to develop his extraordinary gifts in an environment where he was valued for who he was, not pitted for his circumstances. David had been married briefly in his 30s, but the relationship had ended amicably when they realized they wanted different things from life. He had no children of his own, having devoted himself entirely to his work and philanthropic endeavors. The idea of becoming a father, especially to a child with Marcus's unique needs and remarkable potential, was both thrilling and terrifying. After weeks of careful consideration, David decided to take the first step. But he wouldn't approach Marcus directly. That would be too overwhelming and potentially frightening for a child who had learned to be wary of adults making promises. Instead, David devised a plan that would allow him to build a genuine relationship with Marcus while also assessing whether adoption would be the right choice for both of them. He decided to start volunteering at the library, specifically in programs where he would naturally interact with Marcus. David's company had a corporate social responsibility program, and he used this as his cover story, explaining to the library staff that he wanted to volunteer with their technology and educational programs. What he didn't tell them was that this wasn't just corporate charity. This was a man carefully, thoughtfully preparing to potentially become a father to a child who had already captured his heart and earned his profound respect. The day David Sullivan first spoke directly to Marcus began like any other Tuesday at the downtown library. Marcus had arrived at his usual time, claimed his favorite spot near the science section, and was deep into a book about quantum mechanics when he noticed a new volunteer working with Ms. Rodriguez at the technology help desk. The man was tall, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, and seemed genuinely interested in helping patrons with their computer problems rather than just going through the motions like some volunteers did. Marcus observed the newcomer with the same careful attention he applied to everything else in his world. The man was patient with elderly patrons, never talked down to anyone, and had an interesting way of explaining technical concepts using everyday analogies. When Mrs. Patterson, a regular library visitor in her 70s, struggled to understand email attachments, the volunteer compared them to putting photographs in an envelope before mailing a letter. Marcus smiled to himself. It was exactly the kind of explanation he might have used. What Marcus didn't realize was that David had been just as carefully observing him. When the afternoon grew busy and Ms. Rodriguez needed extra help, David seized his opportunity. "Excuse me," he said, approaching Marcus's table with genuine respect in his voice. "I'm David, one of the new volunteers. Ms. Rodriguez mentioned that you're excellent at helping people with technology problems. We have quite a crowd today, and I was wondering if you might be willing to lend a hand." Marcus looked up from his book, meeting David's eyes directly. In that moment, both felt something unusual, a connection that went beyond the typical adult-child dynamic. David wasn't talking to Marcus the way most adults did, with that slightly louder voice and oversimplified language that people often used with children, especially children who were different. Instead, he was speaking to Marcus as one capable person to another, asking for his help rather than offering charity. "I'd be happy to help," Marcus replied, carefully marking his place in the book and following David to the technology area. What followed was a remarkable afternoon of collaboration. Marcus and David worked together seamlessly, with Marcus taking the lead on helping younger patrons while David focused on more complex technical issues. But what impressed David most was watching Marcus train a new teenage volunteer, explaining computer basics with such clarity and patience that the older boy quickly gained confidence. During a brief lull in activity, David and Marcus found themselves alone at the help desk. "That book you're reading looks pretty advanced," David commented, nodding toward Marcus's quantum mechanics text. "Are you following it okay?" Marcus's face lit up. Most adults, when they noticed his reading material, either expressed disbelief or made comments about how smart he was in a tone that felt more patronizing than complimentary. David's question was different. It assumed Marcus was capable of understanding the material and was simply interested in his perspective on it. "Most of it makes sense," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "The mathematical concepts are actually quite elegant once you understand the underlying principles. Though I have to admit, some of the implications about the nature of reality are pretty mind-bending. Have you studied quantum physics?" David smiled. "I have, actually. It was one of my majors in college. What's your take on the measurement problem?" What followed was a 45-minute conversation that would have impressed physics professors at any university. Marcus didn't just regurgitate information he had memorized. He engaged with the concepts, asked probing questions, and offered insights that demonstrated a deep, intuitive understanding of complex theoretical principles. David found himself genuinely challenged by Marcus's questions and impressed by the boy's ability to connect quantum mechanical concepts to broader philosophical questions about consciousness and reality. "You know," David said as their conversation wound down, "I've been thinking about starting a small discussion group for people interested in advanced science topics. It would be informal, maybe meeting here at the library once a week. Would you be interested in participating?" Marcus's eyes sparkled with excitement, but David could also see a flicker of wariness, the look of someone who had learned not to get too excited about opportunities that might disappear. "That sounds amazing," Marcus said carefully. "What kind of topics would you cover?" "Whatever interests the group," David replied. "Physics, mathematics, computer science, maybe some philosophy. I was thinking we could have different people lead discussions on subjects they're passionate about. You clearly have insights worth sharing." Over the following weeks, David's science discussion group became the highlight of Marcus's week. The group consisted of David, Marcus, 2 college students, a retired engineer, and Ms. Rodriguez, who had discovered a love for astronomy. Marcus quickly became one of the most valued contributors, not just for his knowledge but for his ability to ask questions that pushed everyone's thinking in new directions. David was careful to treat Marcus exactly as he treated the other group members, as an intellectual equal whose contributions were valued on their merit, rather than praised for being impressive, for a child. This respect meant everything to Marcus, who had rarely experienced being valued for his mind rather than pitted for his circumstances. But David was also quietly observing how Marcus interacted with the group members outside of their intellectual discussions. He watched Marcus help the college students with study strategies, saw him remember personal details about each member's life and ask thoughtful follow-up questions, and noticed how the boy's natural warmth and genuine interest in others made him the emotional center of the group. One evening, as the group was ending, Marcus lingered behind to help clean up. "David," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you start this group? I mean, you could probably find more advanced discussions at the university or in professional settings. Why spend your time with us?" David paused, recognizing that his answer to this question could be pivotal. Marcus was clearly intelligent enough to sense that there might be more to David's involvement than simple community volunteering, but David wasn't ready to reveal his true intentions. Instead, he chose to share a deeper truth. "Marcus, throughout my career, I've learned that the most innovative thinking doesn't always come from traditional academic settings. Some of the best insights I've encountered have come from people who approach problems from unexpected angles, who aren't constrained by conventional thinking. This group challenges me intellectually in ways that most professional settings don't." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And you don't mind that I'm different?" David looked directly into Marcus's eyes. "Marcus, everyone in our group is different in their own way. What I value about you isn't your age or your height or your circumstances. I value your mind, your curiosity, your kindness, and the unique perspective you bring to every discussion. Those qualities have nothing to do with being different. They have everything to do with being exceptional." For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly seen and valued for who he was rather than defined by what he lacked. He didn't know it yet, but this conversation marked the beginning of the most important relationship of his life. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it temperatures that made Marcus's nighttime survival increasingly precarious. Despite his best efforts to stay warm using layers of donated clothing and careful positioning near heating vents, David could see that the boy was struggling. Marcus's usual energy seemed diminished, and David noticed him occasionally falling asleep during their discussion groups, something that had never happened before. David knew he couldn't wait any longer. The time had come to reveal his true intentions and make an offer that would change both their lives forever. But he also understood that approaching this conversation carelessly could damage the trust and respect they had built over the past several months. Marcus was far too intelligent and had been disappointed by too many adults to accept empty promises or be swayed by pity. The opportunity came during one of their Tuesday library sessions. The discussion group had ended, and Marcus was helping David organize materials when David noticed the boy's hands were red and chapped from cold, despite the library's warmth. "Marcus," David said gently, "can we talk privately for a few minutes?" They moved to a quiet corner of the library where David had often seen Marcus reading alone. "I need to be completely honest with you about something," David began. "When I started volunteering here and created our discussion group, it wasn't entirely for the reasons I initially shared." Marcus's expression grew guarded, the wariness returning to his eyes. David's heart ached, knowing that Marcus was preparing himself for another disappointment, another adult who had ulterior motives. "About 4 months ago," David continued, "I began noticing you here at the library. Not because you're different, but because of how you treat people, how you think, and the remarkable character you demonstrate every day. I've been coming here specifically hoping to get to know you better." "Why?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice carefully neutral. David took a deep breath. "Because I've been looking for someone like you my entire adult life. Someone intelligent, kind, curious, and strong enough to handle both success and adversity with equal grace. Marcus, I'd like to ask if you would consider letting me adopt you." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus's eyes widened, not with the excitement David might have expected, but with a complex mixture of hope, fear, and disbelief. "You want to adopt me?" Marcus repeated slowly. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because over these past months, I've come to believe that you're exactly the kind of person I would be honored to call my son," David replied honestly. "Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I admire you. Not because you need saving, but because I think we could build something remarkable together." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected turn in his life. "What do you do for work?" he asked suddenly. David smiled at the practical question, so typical of Marcus to want to understand the full situation before making any decisions. "I own a technology company. We develop software and systems that help solve complex problems. I'm financially secure. Very secure, actually." "You're rich," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Yes, I am. Does that concern you?" Marcus considered this carefully. Rich people have been through the library before. They usually want to help by giving money or making donations, which is nice, but they don't usually want to spend time actually getting to know anyone. "You've been different. You've treated me like a person whose opinions matter." "Your opinions do matter, Marcus. Your thoughts, your insights, your perspectives, they've enriched my life in ways you can't imagine. These past months of getting to know you have been among the most rewarding of my entire life." Marcus studied David's face intently, using all the people reading skills he had developed over years of navigating difficult situations. What he saw was sincerity, respect, and something else, genuine affection. Not pity, not charity, but the kind of caring that develops between people who truly know and value each other. "If you adopted me," Marcus said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" "I would expect you to be yourself," David replied. "To continue learning, growing, and becoming whoever you're meant to be. I would expect you to let me support your education and help you develop your extraordinary gifts. And I would hope that eventually, you might come to see me as more than just someone who took you in, that you might actually come to think of me as family." Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes, the first tears he had allowed himself to shed in over 2 years. "I don't want you to adopt me because you feel sorry for me," he said quietly. Marcus, look at me, David said gently. When Marcus met his eyes, David continued, I have never felt sorry for you. Concerned for your safety, yes. Impressed by your strength, absolutely. Grateful for your friendship, without question. But sorry for you? Never. You are one of the strongest, most capable people I have ever met. You've survived circumstances that would have broken most adults, and you've done it while maintaining your kindness, your curiosity, and your integrity. I don't want to rescue you, Marcus. I want to be part of your journey. The tears Marcus had been holding back finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, and of a joy he had almost forgotten was possible. For the first time in his life, someone wanted him not despite his differences, but including them. Someone saw his potential not as something surprising given his circumstances, but as something valuable in its own right. What would happen next? Marcus asked, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Well, there would be paperwork, meetings with social workers, legal proceedings, David explained. The adoption process can take several months. But Marcus, I want you to know that regardless of your answer, I'm committed to making sure you're safe and have what you need. If you're not ready for adoption, or if you decide it's not what you want, I can help arrange proper housing and support without any strings attached. This offer comes with no pressure and no conditions beyond wanting what's best for you. Marcus appreciated David's honesty and the fact that he wasn't being pressured to make an immediate decision. But deep down, Marcus already knew his answer. After years of feeling invisible, unwanted, and alone, someone had not only seen him but had chosen to know him, value him, and love him for exactly who he was. I don't need to think about it, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. Yes. Yes, I would like you to adopt me. I would like to be your son. The smile that spread across David's face was matched by Marcus's own, and in that moment, both felt the profound joy of finding the family they had been searching for their entire lives. 6 months later, Marcus Sullivan, he had chosen to take David's last name, stood in the bedroom that was entirely his own, looking out the window at the city skyline that had once been his entire world from a very different perspective. The adoption had been finalized 2 weeks earlier, and Marcus was still adjusting to the reality that this life, this home, this family was actually his. The transition hadn't been without its challenges. Marcus had spent so many years being self-reliant that learning to accept help and support felt foreign at first. David, understanding this, had been patient and thoughtful in his approach. Rather than overwhelming Marcus with sudden luxury, he had focused on providing stability, security, and most importantly, respect for Marcus's autonomy and intelligence. Their home was a comfortable but not ostentatious house in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. Marcus had his own room, filled with books, a high-end computer for his programming projects, and a telescope that David had given him for his 13th birthday. But what Marcus treasured most was the simple fact that this space was permanently his, that he would never again have to worry about where he would sleep or whether he belonged. The educational opportunities that had opened up for Marcus were extraordinary. David had arranged for him to work with private tutors in advanced mathematics and physics while also attending regular middle school classes for subjects like art, music, and physical education, experiences Marcus had missed during his years on the street. More importantly, David had helped Marcus understand that his intelligence was a gift to be developed and shared, not hidden or apologized for. Their science discussion group had evolved as well. What had started as a small library gathering had grown into a monthly symposium that attracted graduate students, professors, and professionals from across the city. Marcus, now confident in his abilities and secure in his place in the world, had become one of the group's most dynamic presenters. His unique perspective, combining advanced theoretical knowledge with hard-won practical wisdom about human nature and resilience, made him a sought-after speaker. But perhaps the most remarkable change in Marcus's life was the development of his relationship with David. What had begun as gratitude and admiration had grown into genuine love and mutual respect. David had proven himself to be not just a provider, but a true father, someone who celebrated Marcus's successes, supported him through challenges, and most importantly, loved him unconditionally. Marcus had also begun to understand the full extent of David's wealth and influence. Sullivan Technologies was one of the most successful firms in the region, and David's philanthropic work touched thousands of lives. But David had never used his wealth as a way to impress Marcus or buy his affection. Instead, he had shown Marcus how resources could be used responsibly to make a positive impact on the world. "You know," Marcus said one evening as they worked together in David's home office, "I used to think that rich people just lived in a completely different world from everyone else. But watching you, I've learned that wealth is really just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters." David looked up from the grant proposals they were reviewing together. Marcus had become his informal advisor on their foundation's educational initiatives. "What made you think about that?" "I was remembering something from when I lived on the streets," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "I used to watch people in expensive cars drive past, and I thought their lives must be so easy, so perfect. But now I realize that having resources doesn't automatically make you happy or fulfilled or even good. It just gives you more choices about how to live and what impact you want to have." "And what impact do you want to have?" David asked, genuinely curious about his son's evolving perspective on his future. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I want to help people who are overlooked the way I was. Not just homeless kids, though that's important too. I mean anyone who has something valuable to offer but doesn't have the right opportunities or support system to develop their potential. I want to create pathways for people to show what they're capable of." David felt a surge of pride and love for this remarkable young man who had not let his difficult experiences make him bitter or self-centered. Instead, Marcus had chosen to use his struggles as motivation to help others facing similar challenges. "Actually," Marcus continued, "I've been thinking about something. You know how our discussion group has grown so much? What if we created a program that brought together people from different backgrounds, street kids, college students, working adults, retirees, to collaborate on solving real problems? Not just theoretical discussions, but actual projects that could make a difference." David smiled. "Tell me more about what you're envisioning." What followed was a detailed presentation that Marcus had clearly been developing for some time. His idea was to create an institute that would identify talented individuals from unconventional backgrounds and provide them with resources, mentorship, and collaborative opportunities to work on innovative solutions to social problems. It would be part educational program, part think tank, and part social enterprise. "Marcus, this is brilliant," David said when Marcus finished his presentation. "How long have you been working on this concept?" "A few months. I wanted to make sure I had thought it through completely before I brought it to you. I know you're always careful about how you invest your resources, and I wanted to prove that this could actually work." David was impressed not just by the sophistication of Marcus's proposal, but by his mature understanding of responsibility and impact. "What would you need to get started?" "Well, I'd want to pilot it small first," Marcus replied. "Maybe start with just a few participants and see how the model works. If it's successful, we could scale it up." "But Dad," Marcus paused, still sometimes surprised by how natural that word had become, "I don't want this to be just about your money. I want to earn support for this idea on its own merits." David felt his heart swell with pride. "Marcus, the fact that you want to earn this rather than simply accept it tells me everything I need to know about your readiness to take on this kind of responsibility. Let's talk about how we can make this happen." As they continued planning, David reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, Marcus had been a homeless child with extraordinary potential but no opportunities to develop it. Today, he was a confident, caring young man who was already thinking about how to use his gifts and advantages to help others. But more than that, Marcus had become the son David had never known he was looking for. Not just someone to carry on his legacy, but someone who would build upon it and make it better. Marcus had taught David as much as David had taught him, showing him that true strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from facing it with grace, dignity, and compassion for others. That night, as David tucked Marcus into bed, a routine they had maintained despite Marcus's growing independence because both cherished these quiet moments of connection, Marcus looked up at his father with serious eyes. "Dad, Do you ever regret adopting me? I mean, your life was probably a lot simpler before. David sat on the edge of Marcus's bed and smiled. Marcus, adopting you wasn't just the best decision I've ever made. It was the decision that made me understand what life is really about. You didn't just gain a father when I adopted you. I gained a son, a purpose, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly wealthy. And that wealth has nothing to do with money. Marcus smiled and closed his eyes, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, valued, and home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to make a positive impact on the world. But tonight, he was simply a 13-year-old boy who had found his family and his place in the world, ready to dream about all the amazing things the future might hold.